the best, if you're into Formula One racing, the best overtake maneuvers happen at corners where cars with the best brakes can drive faster, longer, and take the corner safer. And that's what cybersecurity should be. We should be the brakes on the business, not to slow it down, not to stop it, but to enable it to do what it needs to do in a safe and secure way and navigate its way through. So we shouldn't be saying no. We should be saying yes, but this is how we need to do it, and these are the risks we need to do, and this, and that approach can, get more buy-in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 401 Access Die podcast. I'm the host of the episode, Joe Carson, Chief Security Scientist, Advisory CISO at Delinea. And I'm really, this episode's been a long time coming. This one has been something that has been in my mind for a long, long time. And it's such a special moment because I have got such an amazing guest on the show today. Someone who I've known now, I don't know if you realize it's now 23 years.
Oh
So
wow, that long! Whoa,
it's quite scary when you think about it. It's
I've known you
literally
longer than my kids.
and my kids and my wife. so 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 welcome Brian to the show. Just give the audience a bit of a background of who you are, how you get in the industry, and what you do.
Yeah. So, Joe, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So, yeah, my name's Brian Honan. I'm CEO of BH Consulting. So we're a independent cybersecurity and data protection advisory company based in Dublin, Ireland. But we have clients all over the world, and we offer a range of services from virtual CISOs, virtual DPO, advisory services on anything to do with cybersecurity and with data protection and privacy. And yeah, I've been in the industry for a while now. I've been working in IT since the 80s. So I, my start in security, I was going to say cybersecurity, but it wasn't cybersecurity back then. It wasn't even information security. It wasn't even IT security. It was just security.
It was a key to the room with a computer.
It was, well, like when I started, my job was looking after Wang Mini Systems in the company I worked with, which was a large life assurance company in Ireland called Irish Life.
Mhm.
So they had Wang Mini Systems and an IBM mainframe. That was the computer environment back then. So basically, centralized computers with dumb terminals
Yeah,
uh,
old McDonnell Douglas VT 100s
all throughout the
serial
place.
connections.
So but I was worked. The team I worked in was called Office Technologies,
Mhm.
and it was through there that the first PCs were introduced into Irish Life. And uh, so my career has evolved over the decades as IT has evolved and as computers evolved. And uh, as we went into the 90s and we had downsizing or right sizing from a IT point of view, more data, more systems were moved off the mainframes onto mini systems, onto PCs, onto LANs, etc. And my role was making sure those systems worked and were secure. So yeah, that's how I've been involved in it. Just over the years, it's changed as we kept going.
Absolutely, it's a continuous learning. It's one thing you never
It
stop
is.
learning, and there's always something new, and there's new technology, new distribution. The foundation is always kind of similar, but how you apply it tends to evolve slightly.
Yeah.
It's the
It,
best
it, was-
practices.
it's quite funny to say that, Joe, because last Wednesday night we actually had a reunion dinner with the team I worked with in Irish Life, and the last time we were all together was 34 years ago.
Whoa.
So it was a good night of reminiscing. And somebody asked me that question, how have things changed from a security point of view? And I actually laughed and I said, it's very funny. A lot of the basics we had way back then, access control, privileged access management, backups, perimeter protection and stuff, the fundamentals and the basics are still the same as we had back then. But as you said, applying it now is and how you apply it is differently. And yeah, look, it's an industry that if you want to be continuously challenged is a great place to be because as you said, Joe, not only does the technology changes, but how businesses apply and use that technology changes as well. And even how society uses technology. Back when I started in the 80s and 90s, nobody had home computers. Nobody had smartphones. We had no tablets. There was no internet. Uh, we didn't have smart devices in our houses. We didn't have smart cars. We none of that stuff. So how technology is being used, like technology changes, but how it's being used and how it becomes ingrained in our personal and business lives changes as well, and the threat landscape changes.
Absolutely, the motives and the
The
attackers
motive,
change their
exactly,
techniques all the time, and
exactly.
and you know it's where they're coming from as well. It's I remember seeing a funny meme just recently where it was like, how you unfollowed people in the '90s was you got your house phone and you you took it off, you just took it off the hook,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's how you got peace and quiet. That's how you disconnected from the internet, was you got your phone and you just took it off
Yeah,
so that no one could call you. But that absolutely, it's evolved quite a lot, and even through my times, I've seen a lot of changes from even the '90s, where it was very centralized to decentralized, and then back to centralization again, and how people are applying it. I think the big thing, though, what I've changed is that the change is how the impact can have. It's such more severe now than I remember. Your SLAs back in the '90s could have been a couple of days. You could have had some things where the urgency was not so much there, but now businesses have become so dependent on digital services that even minutes can have severe impacts.
yeah, no, it
um,
does. I think it's interesting as well. You talk about, if you like the what's old is new and what's new is old, and you've gone decentralized and centralized.
right.
But I'd actually think we've now gone to a decentralized, centralized
Yep.
model because people talk about, oh yeah, we're back in the 80s, 90s with mainframes, and now we've got the cloud, so we've now gone back to centralized computing. But not really, because back in the 80s and 90s, when you had a centralized computing model, it was in your own data center on your own systems.
Correct. It was
It
plugged into your
wasn't,
own power supply.
yeah, but it wasn't, oh, we've got one part of our business, critical part of our business with one cloud service provider, and we've got another one with another cloud service provider, and we have another part with somebody else, and we also now have remote workers and people connecting from devices we don't know anything about. So yeah, you can talk about maybe it's centralized, but it's not really. It's probably
Absolutely.
more distributed than ever. It's just a decentralized centralization.
That's- it does make me
I'm
think.
gonna trademark that one.
That's-
The decentralized centralized perimeter. There we go. We've got a new model.
We got a new buzzword we can use
Exactly.
for
I'm just going to
upcoming.
say that.
We're
Just,
always missing marketing terms, and I think marketing really have, they're missing a few new key
yeah,
items. We've had that whole pendulum from blockchain to, was it AI, and now we're missing something.
yeah.
Zero trust is kind of come and gone.
I was just going to say, Joe, we can call it now because zero trust is dead. The new thing now is decentralized, centralized perimeters.
Oh, fantastic! So for one of the great things is that when I get to chat with you, it brings back so many memories. So the audience probably don't know. I did mention at the beginning
Yeah,
that we've known each other longer than our kids and, and my wife. Um, that we go back, 23 years. I remember I was just coming off the back of Y2K and patching the ambulance services systems, and I remember standing in the emergency call room because the ambulance service was responsible for the call center for distributing the calls to the fire, to police, and also ambulance and paramedics. And I remember even standing, in the control room, waiting for that, the midnight, the millennium clock, and just waiting for nightmare to happen. Because at that point, you just fear. There was emergency calls coming in. I remember, like, it's different, interesting hearing the calls, but I was just standing there in fright about what was potentially going to happen. And it just came and it went with nothing.
yeah.
Um,
But I
and
think
then
that's a good analogy for how a good cybersecurity program works.
yes,
You only know you only know cybersecurity is around when it fails. That's if you're doing a good job. And Y2K as an IT industry, I think we everybody done a great job. There's so much work went into prep
oh,
prepping for that and getting ready for it and uh, being prepared. So a big event became a non-event, and it kind of like was, well, what was the big deal about, you know? And
It's because we
in
did
many
our
ways,
job.
yeah.
That's
Well, in
that's
many
what.
ways, cybersecurity is the same thing as well. You know, we're saying this is a big business threat, and
Uh,
people only sit up and pay attention when it goes wrong. You know, like here in Ireland last year, we
mm,
had the HSE ransomware attack, which took down the whole health system for the country. And then people go, "Oh my God, yeah, it's
uh,
really serious." And then this year, I was reading the World Economic Forum cybercrime report, and it had the top 5 risks per country. And in
mhm.
Ireland, cyber is not mentioned, even though
Nope.
12 months ago
It's
it
it's
happened.
it's it the priority changes so quickly.
It does. It
So the
does. Yeah.
so but it, I mean, it just for me, absolutely, that I still think I've still got my Y2K floppy disk somewhere, because I spent so many times just going around putting that in so many computers and
Yeah.
just patching the systems. And you're absolutely right, is that when there's, sometimes we have to sometimes stop and think, and thank the security team when it is quiet, because
Yes.
that's when you can celebrate. So, quick question. So, what do you see? I read the World Economic Cyber Outlook report. Cyber was up there as again a top risk,
Hmm.
and I think even it was even to the point where they were looking at major catastrophe type of impact over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
What what types of threats do you see is the things that businesses should be worried about today? What's the things that they should be prioritizing and defending against?
Yeah, so look, I wear several hats, I suppose. One, as I said, I'm CEO of BH Consulting, and we have helped victims of cybercrime and cyber attacks recover their systems. But I also founded and head up iResearch, Ireland's first computer emergency response team, and I've I'm an advisor to several other companies and stuff like that. So, but quite common across a lot of them, the main threats I see right now, ransomware is the number one threat, and it's simply because it's the quickest and easiest way for cyber criminals to monetize their work. You know, like uh, uh, they can make money very quickly, and
The
there are
urgency's there, and
urgency. Like they're criminals. They want to make money,
yeah.
and they want to make it quickly, and they want to make it easy. So
Mhm,
hacking into a system, stealing credit card data, personal data, trying to monetize
mm,
that and sell it on, or hacking in and stealing intellectual property and
mhm,
trying to monetize that. That's still happening. Don't get me wrong. That is still happening, but it's a lot. That's a more long game
yeah.
and long time to return. Ransomware, it's in your face. Your systems are
Mhm.
down. Either and from the criminal point of view, either you pay us the money
Or,
or
are you,
you don't.
you're
And
rebuilding. You're rebuilding, or you
yeah,
hope that the backup is solid enough that you have
exactly.
something to recover
You
to.
know, so
And
so so the criminals are out there.
yeah,
They're looking to make money, and they're looking at ways to, and they're even altering their models. So it's not just uh, holding
mhm,
your data to ransom. It's also, well, if you don't pay this ransom, we won't give you the keys to decrypt your data. But
mhm,
also, here's another ransom, so we don't publish it on the internet.
yeah.
Oh, and by the way,
We're
we've
also
also
ransoming your customers as well.
yeah, and that's happened in some cases, where the criminals have
Yeah,
gone to customers of those companies and said, "We've got your personal data. If you don't pay up, we're going to put it onto the internet." And I've heard of cases where criminals have gone through emails of companies and have
mhm,
identified uh, unethical, or in some cases even illegal behavior, and threatened
yeah,
the companies to and blackmail them, saying, we release this to the regulator if you don't pay up. So criminals just want to make
mm,
money, and
yeah,
that's why ransomware is going to continue to be the biggest threat.
mhm.
Now, I do have a bone to pick with our industry about ransomware. Like
Wait,
we are.
what would this be if you didn't have a bone to pick?
If I didn't have a rant, exactly,
So,
and I think one of the things ransomware is, in many ways, is a very big red flag to show how our industry has failed. You know, uh, Ransomware at its core is just another piece of malicious software. It's nothing fantastic. Yes, we joked earlier on about the marketing people, but yet we have companies making new products to stop ransomware, and you're going, well, shouldn't that be built into your security product already? So all these security products we bought, and how we manage our IT. What ransomware is actually highlighting is how badly, as an industry, we're failing to protect our data, uh, because fundamentally, a lot of the if you look at a lot of the ways to protect and prevent ransomware, it's all the stuff we joked about at the beginning. It's the basic stuff
It's the
put in
basic.
place. It's the
It's the
backup.
things we
It's privilege access. It's access control. It's you know, but yet we're
good password choices.
exactly, it's getting in there. So ransomware I see has been the number one. The other one we're
Mhm.
seeing is social engineering, but particularly in CEO or invoice redirection fraud.
Yes,
Uh,
and business email compromise and
correct.
changing,
Yeah.
modifying invoices,
Yes.
changing the routing of those payments. Yeah.
But where we're seeing a change now as well is not just on email compromise, but
Mm.
using other messaging platforms. Because we've joked, Joe, that you and I are older people in the industry, and there's other channels that people are using nowadays. It's social media, WhatsApp,
Yeah.
other messaging systems, and criminals are impersonating CEOs and senior people on those platforms and targeting people in the
Mhm.
organization. So we've seen uh, uh, business, in, uh, fraudulent behavior from criminals
Mhm.
who have created fake WhatsApp profiles
Yeah.
of the company's CEO and sent that message then to staff via WhatsApp or whatever, and getting them to buy uh,
Gift cards and
gift
share the
cards,
numbers. Yeah,
or
that's
to process it, or to
yeah.
process an invoice quickly. So that's where we see a lot of so messaging
Mhm.
platforms are going to be abused to facilitate fraud, because let's not put a fancy name on this.
Yeah.
It's fraud. It's not business email
It's
compromise, invoice redirect. It's fraud,
that's
right?
it's fraud. Fraud is it's always getting. I always like to try and distinguish. One of the things I learned from you was always make
Oh,
sure you distinguish. The technique from the motive. What is your underlying category? And I
yeah,
also learned it as well in Estonia when I remember one of the cases working in 2007 when Estonia had the cyber attack. And one of the reason why I always get into is always make sure you understand what category it falls under. One of the banks, when they did basically the remediation to a DDoS attack, was that basically they brought up a secondary system. So DDoS attack, they brought up basically a secondary transactional system, and that was actually their worst mistake because ultimately the DDoS was not consistent. The production system was up and down, up and down, up and down, and the backup system was also, taking the transactions. They ended up having two systems where the source of truth of transactions went through, and it meant that the DDoS attack lasted for a few days, but it meant that they had to now maintain two production systems for the rest of the financial year, and that was more costly than actually if they just waited out the DDoS attack itself. So they actually created a bigger problem by not looking at what it was they're dealing with. They just looked at their thing. Okay, we've got a service outage. The production system is unavailable. What's our to do list say? It says bring up the backup system, make it production, turn it from was it an active standby to an active, and that ultimately was their worst case. So and even going back, that's what I always remember is always make sure you'd fully understand it. What is the motive here? What's the intention? Business email compromise is just one of the techniques they use in order to get to financial fraud.
yeah,
It's one of the paths.
exactly. Yeah, and then I suppose the other threats I see business need to be worried about is with so many businesses have migrated to the cloud, primarily in response to uh, the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and to facilitate remote working, etc., is account hijacking. So, be that you've moved your email to a cloud email provider or your CRM system or whatever, we're seeing a lot of attacks trying to compromise. So, either brute force attacks, or the next threat then is targeting the people in your organization, is trying to phish credentials or getting to click on links or whatever else. So yeah, to me they'd be the top four: ransomware, uh, uh, fraud. I
Yeah,
wasn't going to call it
fraud. We'll
business,
just call it. We'll just call it financial fraud.
financial fraud, uh, cloud account hijacking, and target individuals. And like all of those kind of overlap as well, because they're controls you can put in place
Mhm.
that can reduce the risk based on each one of those. So yeah, yeah, look, it's going to keep us busy for quite a while.
It definitely is, and I mean, I've even been having fun with ChatGPT as well about helping it make craft interesting
Yeah,
messages for me. So asking this way, can you help me create an email? And it'll actually create it for you. That will
yeah,
actually be perfect. That it looks authentic. So even for me, it's just natural language understanding and automation. It's a simple way of creating without me having to do the work. And it's
yeah.
great at doing that. And I've seen that also evolving where it's helping much more on the automation side.
Yeah, well, look, in fairness as well, is uh, you don't need ChatGTP to craft an email to get to convince somebody to click on a link or whatever. It's when you investigate some of these issues and you just see what the email was that came in. It can be very
Uh,
basic.
yeah, and even from my because I myself get targeted quite a lot from the phishing scams, and it's also looking, and
Mm.
I'm pretty sure you are also you probably get a lot of them as well. It is getting quite difficult to distinguish. Some of them are well crafted
Oh, there, yeah,
and kind of and also have really good ways of bypassing a lot of the filters. So it does get to the person ultimately.
yeah.
That's also an area that we had to really look at.
Yeah,
So one
but
of the things, so
this kind of nicely loops back into my rant earlier on as well.
yeah,
Like it gets the person, and then somebody clicks on a link or an attachment, and it brings down the whole environment. Like, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, that user clicked on a link; it was their fault." No, it's not.
it's
We didn't have the right controls in place. You didn't have the right
that's
protections in place. Your whole company shouldn't grind to a halt just because somebody does what an email is designed to do.
oh,
Emails were designed to have attachments, to have links in them.
the
People
internet
click
was
on links. They
the
click on
internet was
attachments.
created to click on things. It was
Yeah,
that's the whole purpose of the browser was
exactly.
to click on,
Yeah,
was to make life easy. So absolutely, that's one of the things I hate is human, blaming it on users.
yeah,
And we have to that's for me, I think one of the things we had to as an industry get away from, and start looking about we're really there to help them. We're there to navigate them in the right way, and clicking on a link should not have a path to taking the business down.
yeah.
It
No,
should not
absolutely.
have
And
that.
even if you think of the phrases we use in IT, like we call people users. As far as I'm aware, there's only two industries that call their people, their customers, users: IT and drug dealers. You know,
it's, it's the similarities are so aligned.
it
So
is. Like we're probably, and then we wonder why people
yeah.
don't like us when we go and try and fix things.
Well, that's why we created in IT. We created a whole industry, which is the help desk team, to be the immediate filter between IT and the people in
Yeah,
the organization. So one of the things I wanted to ask you on today's episode as well was that you do a lot around compliance and standards and stuff.
yeah,
How important is that for businesses? How important is it for organizations? Is compliance the goal, or is it really to find themselves in some type of where do they sit, or where's the risks exposed to?
yeah.
What's the path? How do organizations do it right? What's the
Right.
right path?
Well, I think, Joe, we could tie up a few episodes just talking about compliance, and I know there's a lot of various views out there. And look, my point is, you can be compliant doesn't mean you're going to be secure. You could also be secure doesn't mean you're compliant. I think you've identified the key thing there is that risk is the key thing to running a good security program that takes compliance into account as well. And compliance is going to become a much bigger thing. When people think about compliance from a cybersecurity point of view, we think, oh, PCI, GDPR. Well, if you're going to be operating in the EU or doing any business in the EU, there's a lot more regulations coming down that are going to make your life much more difficult. You've the Digital Services Act, you've the Cybersecurity Act, the Cybersecurity Strategy, you've uh, DORA, you've got various other regulations coming through, which are going to impact not just the end users of technology, but also the suppliers of technology. So, regulation is coming in to try and raise the bar that companies should meet to protect information. And people complained about PCI. Oh my God, when it came out first of all, oh my God, what PCI is? It's really tough to get to get to PCI, and I'm going, no, PCI is what you should have in place anyway. And many of it's many regulatory frameworks are just saying, look, good security, this is what you need to have in place. But from a business point of view, I think firstly you need to look at your whole cybersecurity program as and frame it as to how are we managing risk to the business, how are we managing risk to the organization. So obviously a lot of that risk is going to be technical risk. We talked about ransomware and stuff like that, but then there's also human risk. So financial fraud via email or via WhatsApp messages or via
Even
uh,
voice today, even
or
people
voice
calling. Yeah,
or video calls
yeah.
or AI or whatever. It's uh, it's targeting the human, but it's
Hmm.
still there's still processes that happen outside of IT. Like issuing a payment and
Hmm.
authorizing the payment and etc. There should be checks and balances there that don't necessarily rely on cybersecurity controls.
I, I
And
think.
same then with your compliance, like what
Mhm.
regulations apply to your business, and
Yeah.
how do you match that into your cybersecurity framework, and communicate that to the board
Hmm.
and communicate that to senior management so they understand. Oh, okay, so we're doing this to manage this risk.
Hmm.
As opposed to sort of saying, oh look, we get 1 million attacks on our firewall per day, so we need to buy another firewall. Like they just go, what? Where if you can talk in business risk
If you
and
can
business
convert it,
terms,
yeah.
that's right.
So you got me thinking about a very important thing, and it was always something that I always did is a practice myself. And I think in IT and in digital and security that we probably have to do better at it. I think one of the things that I find is that what distinguishes from the criminals that goes in and does this, what they do really well is they don't just understand the technology really well, they understand your business really well. And I think that's where probably the gap is that we in the IT tend to focus more on the technology side, and the attackers, what they do is they go in, you just look back and I'm trying to remember the guy that it was either Lithuanian or Latvian that basically did the financial fraud for Meta, Google, and basically was just changing the invoices and sending invoices and just understood the financial payments really well in those organizations to take advantage of it. And I think that's what criminals are doing really well is they start to understand the business processes really well and find weaknesses in them and take advantage of that. And I think that's what we should be doing more is trying to understand about how does the processes work in the organization, not just from the technology, but ultimately the end-to-end service, and find out where the risks are in that, whether it being people or whether it being where's the checks and balances to make sure that we minimize the risk where possible.
Yeah, and look, and sometimes people might say, to you, you're getting outside your box. You should be stuck over there with IT and cybersecurity. Don't become to us about financial controls and stuff. But I think this is where we need as we evolve in
Mhm.
cybersecurity to become a more critical and like critical as the business is
Mhm.
it's helping manage business risk, and we need to get allies out there.
Mhm.
So instead of going in and sort of saying, no, you can't do this because of security, well then it's, as you said, Joe, it's talking to that person who's running that project and saying, well, what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah.
What is the business reason behind this? Okay. Like I often use the story and the analogy about saying that security is like brakes on a car. And when I ask people, what does a brake do brakes in a car do? They all say, well, yeah, that makes sense. Brakes in a car and security because it slows things down or it stops things. And I go, no, brakes on a car make you go faster. And they look at me, go, what? Brakes make your brakes on your car make you go faster. And I says, yeah, think about it. If
Because
you'd
you know
no
they're there.
brakes on your car, how fast could you drive? you know the best, if you're into Formula 1 racing, the best overtake maneuvers happen at corners where cars with the best brakes can drive faster, longer, and take the corner safer. And that's what cybersecurity should be. We should be the brakes on the business, not to slow it down, not to stop it, but to enable it to do what it needs to do in a safe and secure way and navigate its way through. So we shouldn't be saying no, we should be saying yes, but this is how we need to do it, and these are the risks we need to do, and this, and that approach can, get more buy-in, and know, even when I'm talking at some seminars, I often ask the CISOs in the audience or IT security people in the audience, how many of you have read your company's annual report? Are many of you aware of what the business plan is for the business or what its business goals are? And sadly, very few hands go up in the audience. But if you're to ask that same question, and I have done because I've talked to audiences that have been in financial people or whatever, because they're looking to become more aware about cybersecurity. And I've asked them, well, how many of you have read the annual report? And the majority of their hands go up. So if we want to champion cybersecurity and we want cybersecurity to be taken seriously within the business, well, then we have to take business seriously
Absolutely.
as well.
And we
And
have to ask the right questions and get
correct.
more involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one of the things that, because one of the things I've done is whatever industry I'm working in, I try to put myself in the person's position to understand about what it's like to be in their shoes, what
Yeah.
it's like to be in the day to day activities. So one is it helps me understand about the environment they work in. What they're one The other thing is also how they get measured for success, because people don't get measured for security, they get measured in how well they do their job. And my goal is always about how I can make sure that what I'm doing helps them be successful. And that's ultimately, I think that's the translation that we're always missing. And I think that's
Yeah.
an important point, is to make sure that we as an industry also really understand what is the ultimate business goals, and try to align ourselves to that and try to ask the right questions, and also measure security in such a way that actually shows the value to those business goals as well.
No, absolutely. And we need to design controls that are not blockers to people. Like I've dealt with security instance where, you know, there's been a data leak because somebody was working remotely or a salesperson out on the road decided, to in order to log into into get email, they have to log into the VPN, and they have to have a token to plug into their computer. They have to have a password to log into their laptop, a password to log into the VPN, and then, oh, now you have to have another password to log into your email. And uh, they just go, oh, to hell, I'll just set forwarding rules on my email to my Gmail account and pick it up
Yeah.
from there, or my other
Yeah.
online account.
Or
And
they
so
make all the passwords the same.
I'll make all the passwords the same. Yeah, it's uh, and it's not that people want to uh, do their jobs in security. They just want to do their jobs. So we
Absolutely.
need to make sure we're putting things in place that are transparent
Mhm.
and the user experience is pleasant.
Yeah. That
So
was
it's
one thing you just mentioned, really important, measurement. And one of the things you mentioned, you talked about earlier about how many attacks did the firewall block. But one of the things I remember talking to a few CISOs, and they started talking about some of their new metrics that they're looking at, and its user experience is about how well is the user enjoying security. What is their net promoter score for security? And it's always ironic, is like, but that's a great measurement, because the more people that enjoy using it, because I think to your point about having all of those steps just makes the create friction. And ultimately the idea is that we need to removing friction. Whenever we put something new in place, it should always be looking at how do we make it better than what they had before. And security, we find security is always hard, that it does create friction, but we always have to think about how we make it better, how can we make it better for that person, so that this experience is actually better for them. And therefore that they don't see security as a blocker, they see it as something that becomes almost just in the background, that doesn't cause them to not hit their goals and metrics, and not get their bonus, or not get their performance outlook is for the year. So that's, to your point, is that security needs to be quiet
it does.
in the
You shouldn't
background.
notice it. You shouldn't notice security. It should be. It's like driving your car. You
Yeah,
don't you don't notice the crumple zones or the airbags or anything else until you absolutely need it.
yeah.
And you don't need to be an engineer to make sure those things work in your car either.
Absolutely. It just needs to be there when the bad things happen,
Exactly.
and it makes
Yeah.
it makes the biggest difference. So for organizations and stuff that's going down this path, what would be the top thing that you would recommend for them to do? What would be that one thing that how to get started, or should one of the big things they have a lot of problems with is things like getting resources today. Who's the right people? Should they try doing this alone? should they get help? What would you recommend an organization? What would be the top
That's
thing?
a yeah, that's a very big question, Joe. I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I think it depends
Yeah,
on the
their
industry you're
business.
in. It
Mhm,
depends on the resources you have. It depends on uh, uh, which country you're in as well. Some countries have good government-led initiatives,
mhm.
others don't. I'm falling behind, and I've just realised, and I've just given you the typical consultant answer by saying it depends,
It depends.
But uh, I would strongly recommend anybody who's listening to this now, whether they're in Europe or elsewhere, that there's a lot of great resources available on the European Agency for Cybersecurity, ENISA. So that's enisa.eu. They have a whole lot of information there on not just what you need to do from a technical point of view to manage security, but also from risk and the different regulations and stuff that are coming through, how to manage risk, how to manage the cloud, how to do good incident response. Um, like uh, like I'm involved in some of the working groups within ESA, and one of the latest publications that they came out last year was a complete guide to small businesses on how to manage cybersecurity in the business, and they have a 12-step guide for business to follow. So even if you're a large organization, and if you've got no experience in cybersecurity, that will be a good start because it gives you, again, we talked about earlier on, a good understanding of the basics.
I think
And
that's really important. What you're saying is, and we'll definitely make sure. I'll look to make sure we get that included in the show notes. The link
yeah,
to those because sometimes people just don't know where to find them,
yeah,
and if you search, it's not always going to be the first thing that comes up in your Google searches, and if it's not on page one, it gets lost. So,
it is.
um,
And there's so many stuff out there, but I would
yeah,
recommend completely Anisa because A, it's an independent body.
mhm.
It's EU funded, so it's not sponsored by any
The
vendors or
vendors are
anything like
or
that. Uh, for us in Europe, it's
mm,
quite good because not only are the publications in English, but they're also in all the member
other,
state languages. So Estonian, it's
yeah,
available in Estonian. It's available in French, Germany.
mhm,
So all these guides are available in the different languages. And we talked about the human risk. Like there's even they've released now
mhm.
awareness raising in a box, which
Mhm.
is a toolbox that you can use to kick off your security awareness program, and it's free.
Important. The free
Yeah,
part
that's a
is
great price point. It's free. I
so
can't give you a better discount than that, Joe.
that's so I think that's fantastic, and I think that's a great kind of place to kind of to leave the audience on is where resources, how to get it, and
Hmm.
again it's just finding those, and then you can apply it yourself and find out then what's the best practice for the business, and then go through that understanding about, as we mentioned, understanding what your business goals are,
Yeah,
what the risks are, and then lots of resources to help you make sure you kind of apply it, and depending on kind of what the business goals are. So it's
exactly.
fantastic. Brian, this has been amazing chatting with you. And it's been too long since we last had a drink in person. So because you
Yeah, I
always
think it was when was it? Summer last year, wasn't it?
it was summer last year. Yes, it was
Yeah,
the first conference.
that's right. Yeah,
That was
yeah,
fantastic. So
yeah,
you always one of the things I enjoy definitely about the in person is just getting surrounding yourself with such amazing people,
yeah.
including yourself. And one of
Thank
the things that usually when I'm talking to a lot of industry kind of you always get that the fear side of things, but when I talk to you, I always get to that, it makes me laugh and it makes me enjoy enjoy what we're doing. Because sometimes we always have to look back and think, that at the same time, it is a scary place to work in, and you do see a lot of bad things. But sometimes we just have to
you.
sit back and just enjoy it, and have those moments of laughter. Because
Oh, yeah.
what else what else is life
Uh,
in store for?
life is too short to be taken seriously. Seriously, you know.
Absolutely. And so fantastic. I mean, 23 years. Let's hope
Wow.
we have another 23 left.
Oh, hopefully,
so,
hopefully.
so Brian, it's been awesome having you on the show.
Thank you,
And so
Joe.
really, hopefully that at some point in time we get to catch up this year for
Absolutely.
a good Guinness and a good drink.
Yeah.
And for the audience, it's been fantastic. Definitely. take some of Brian's advice and recommendations, and hopefully it's been very valuable for you. So, any final thoughts of wisdom, Brian? Because I know you. Any good jokes or anything?
Oh God, no, no. My kids will tell me I don't have any good jokes at all, But no, I think just as you said there, Joe, is steer away from the fear and the FUD, because
Mhm.
that's not what security is about. Security is not about scaring things. Security is about enabling people and enabling businesses and enabling society to function properly. So
That's very important.
that's
It's
really
it's
it.
yeah. Don't
Yeah,
don't don't focus on the scary things. Let's focus on what we can make a difference to the world. I think
exactly.
that's the outcome. So
Yeah.
fantastic, Brian. It's been awesome, and again, look forward to seeing you. For the audience, again, this is the 401 Access Denied podcast. We've had awesome Brian Honan on the show, and definitely go follow him on social media. You'll always definitely get lots of laughter and lots of wise advice as well. So tune in every 2 weeks and stay safe, take care, and see you again soon. Thank you.